Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Q&A session for our upcoming course, Integrating Your Instincts Through the Enneagram, a 10-week journey to heal your personality and balance your primal drives to find spiritual wholeness. This is Amy Isakov here at the Shift Network, and it is my honor and joy to be hosting this hour-long Q&A call where we'll explore the teachings of Russ Hudson and address questions about his upcoming 10-week course, Integrating Your Instincts Through the Enneagram, which begins next Tuesday, November 27th. Later on, I'll explain how you can participate in this course even if you can't attend the live session. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Russ Hudson is co-founder of the Enneagram Institute, is one of the principal scholars and innovative thinkers in the Enneagram world today. He's also president of Enneagram Personality Types, Inc. He's been co-teaching Enneagram professional training programs since 1991 and is a founding director and former vice president of the International Enneagram Association. Russ co-authored The Wisdom of the Enneagram, Personality Types, Understanding the Enneagram, Discovering Your Personality Type, and The Power of the Enneagram. Russ also assisted Don Riso in writing Enneagram Transformations. He holds a degree in East Asian Studies from Columbia University in New York and generally makes this Enneagram information easily accessible and applicable to our daily lives. So in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for questions. But first, I want to welcome Russ, who will open our space by leading us in a meditation. So welcome, Russ.
Hi, thank you, Amy, and thank you, everyone, for coming. Welcome. We're going to be entertaining your questions today, but just to get us all into the right space, let's see if we can first ground ourselves, center ourselves a little bit. So I want to just take a moment to invite us to land a little more deeply in our direct experience, to come into more presence. So wherever we are, probably we're breathing, and we're sitting or standing or laying somewhere. So let's begin by becoming aware of the body. The instincts that we'll be exploring in this course live in the body. There are energies in the body. Not only that, the body is an amazing, magnificent way to come into our more direct here and now experience. And the easiest way that I've found to do that, and it seems many other teachers would agree, is finding my breath. Now, I'm already breathing, but there's a process of becoming aware of my breathing, aware of my breath. I'm just taking a moment to really find that, sense the breathing. If I'm doing that and staying with it for more than a moment, I start to feel more of my whole body. I start to find more of what we call sensation. Maybe in my extremities, in my hands and feet, there's some kind of sensation or tingling. Perhaps I can feel the weight of my body and whatever I'm sitting in or standing on or laying on. Perhaps I can sense the temperature, the air caressing my skin. As I'm sensing and breathing, generally speaking, I'll begin to relax and settle more into my direct experience. And as I'm also dropping in, there's going to likely be a sense of softening. I don't have so many hard edges inside. There's a feeling of gentleness that can come toward myself, toward my experience. And this is the heart coming online. A kind of delicacy, a fineness that usually gets covered over by the loud noisiness of my usual thoughts and emotional reactions. But this fineness is always here. I just have to let things quiet down a bit to notice it. The intelligence of the heart is always here, patiently waiting for me to show up with it. And then also the mind gets quieter. There's more of a sense of listening, not just with my ears, but with all of me. It's like I'm listening to the moment. With all of that together, I'm in a much better place to share, to learn, to actually be in the life that I'm living. So may we all, by our presence and our contact, have an amazing hour together. And may we be supported by our mutual presence, even though we're not in the same room. Perhaps you can feel, as I'm feeling right now, I can feel many of you just dropping in with me. There's a way we're connecting even across what it looks like long distances. So thank you. And we can start to entertain some of your questions now. So what do we got, Amy?
Oh, thank you, Russ. That was really lovely and restorative. So we have the remainder of our time to dive into questions as we prepare for this upcoming course, Integrating Your Instincts through the Enneagram, which begins next Tuesday, the 27th. Just want to mention, if people want to read more about this course before we take some questions, you can visit awakeningyourinstincts.com to see the full description of this 10-week course. Again, that's awakeningyourinstincts.com. So if you have any questions, please just type them in, and I would be happy to read them out. Now, several of you wrote to us before the call, so I'm going to go ahead and start with some of those. This question came in anonymously, and it says, typing people through questionnaires seems to me to be too difficult, especially if you do not know yourself. What is your feeling about typing via questionnaires versus workshops where a person is exposed to all the types and finds one's own?
An excellent question. As you probably know, I was one of the developers of one of the popular tests that are out there, the Hudson Enneagram typing indicator, the READY. I think tests are a piece of information. And I think they can be a good springboard for someone to begin to explore this material. I think tests work best when you discuss the results with either someone who is trained in the Enneagram or perhaps even with people who know you very well. It can be a way of asking questions. The problem with tests is that they're assuming a kind of information, a knowledge about oneself that the Enneagram is here to help us acquire. So we may or may not know ourselves as clearly as we might think. So tests are, again, a good starting place. If a person can get to a workshop and work with other people and get a sense of all the types, at the bare minimum, read the books, I think that's better. You're going to get a better sense. The other thing to say about it is that I think tests can reify or reinforce the concept that the whole point of this is just to find your type. I'm not so sure about that anymore. I don't think that finding your type is the end of the road here. It's the beginning of the road. As we'll talk about in the course, I'm really wanting to use this information to leverage our self-knowledge and our presence and our capacity to inhabit what we call the centers in the Enneagram work, the body, the heart, and the head, and some things deeper than that as well. So Tests, I think, as I said, along with other things, can really help us on the journey. They can open the right conversations. They can get us to start thinking a little bit outside of the box in the way we usually think about things. As the sole determinant of our type, well, I just say it's better if you are looking at this with other people, as I said, or if you do have access to a workshop or a teacher, something like that. The only other thing I'd say is be cautious about letting a teacher tell you what type you are. I personally don't do that with my students. I think it's the chance of me being wrong or any other teacher being wrong is sufficient that I don't want to be doing that. And second of all, originally this material was provided to get people going on a journey of self-discovery. So the search for our type actually activates a kind of attention in us that the very quality of attention we need to do the deeper Enneagram work. But if I just tell you what your type is, I've deprived you of that journey. I've said many times it's like giving people a great novel and then telling them how it ends as you hand it to them. It's sort of defeats the purpose of reading the novel. There's great value, I think, in the search for your type, even if that doesn't come to a quick result. Acquiring the ability to really look at our experience with a combination of kindness and a kind of clarity and almost ruthless honesty with ourselves. You kind of need both. These are the best tools, I think, for finding our type and then going from that discovery into using that information for our real development and inner work. So I hope that's a good answer for your question.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Russ. I have a question here from Jeanette, sort of along the same lines. She says, how much do we really transform our instinct? Or is it more embracing, understanding our instinct as it is?
Another great question. I think instincts do transform, but not quickly. This isn't an overnight phenomena. This isn't a fast food version of enlightenment or something. Our instincts begin to shift and transform as we become more awake to them. We have to sort of catch them in real time. Don Riso and I, in the book Wisdom of the Enneagram, used to talk about catching ourselves in the act, meaning noticing what we're doing while we're doing it, not thinking about it after the fact. We have a lot of self-concepts around the instincts, some of which are correct and some of which may not be. So I'm in favor of presencing them, starting to know them by taste, what they feel like in our body. And from there, we begin to understand better how to work with them. I talk a lot in this course about the transmutation of the instincts. They tend to go in three stages. They go from the instincts supporting my ego to actually doing their correct function to support my life, my physical life and well-being, and as being part of this planet. And then third, they become the fuels necessary for the development of my soul or of my consciousness. And people kind of go through a process there. So we'll be looking at that in various ways in the course. But I think they do transform. But it's odd, your question, because that begins by just recognizing how they are. They don't change by me trying to change them exactly. They change by me becoming aware of them and starting to feel what they're actually for. And they also change as I begin to notice the ones that I repress, the ones I don't give much attention to. Sometimes just giving a little more life and light and heartful energy to the neglected parts of my instinctual life is also very important. So we'll talk about all these matters in the course, as a matter of fact. But I hope that answers your question. It's kind of both, but the latter hopefully leads to the former.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Russ. I have a question here from Ellen Birgit. She says, How do I balance my blind instinct, SP?
P is self-pres, I'm guessing. Yeah. How do I balance my blind? I'm assuming you're referring to, Ellen Brigitte, is the way I teach about the instincts. It's great to find your dominant one, but you have all three, no matter what Enneagram type you are, no matter what your preferences. The other two are operating, and one of them tends to get neglected, tends to get overlooked. And so there are different defenses against actually engaging that one. So we'll be exploring that in the course as well. I would say that when you're working with self-pres, a lot of it has to do with finding things that support your well-being. Now, those may or may not look like what some of your friends do or what an expert says you ought to do. I think it's very important that we take on little things and build our way up. Self-pres, for those of you who don't know, is one of the three instinctual drives. It's the first to develop, actually, and it has to do broadly with how we take care of ourselves, how we handle practical stuff in the world, and how we maintain our home and our various bases of operation in life. So when self-pres is the blind spot, we kind of take that part of life for granted. We don't give it a lot of time and energy. We may even feel trapped by it. I think what we look at are some of the psychological fears or issues that come up when we have to deal with that, and there usually are some. What am I believing will happen if I take better care of myself? What am I believing will happen if I'm more attentive to practical matters and so forth? The other thing, as I said, is just finding small ways that I actually can find some enjoyment in doing that help me build that part of my life. And, it may be that some parts of self-pres I'm already okay at, and other parts are needing more love and more time. So you build on your successes, and from those, you can start to access the areas that are more neglected. I don't think anybody comes to perfect balance, but I think we get good enough at these neglected areas that it stops hampering our lives and creating trouble for us. It's also true that when we work with the neglected instinct, it helps us be less obsessive about our dominant. We're less hung up on it, you could say. So, those are broad things to say, but I think in the circumstances, this is hopefully a helpful bit of advice. So thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Russ. I have a question here from Elaine. Elaine says, I'm wondering how I can feel freedom around decision making. I'm realizing that many of my past decisions were made impulsively and without much thought. I've spent much time healing from the painful consequences. At 64, in great health, lots of free time, many gifts to offer, and yet nothing seems to call me. I feel fearful in taking on any responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's a time for a break from that. It's hard to say, but I think you're recognizing something in the maturity of your life that the Enneagram work points to. And it's why I think the Enneagram work, without the developmental aspects of it, without the presence practices, the Enneagram without the body of practices that support it can't do very much. Because what we start to understand is when we're in our fixated patterns, we think we're making decisions. But as you said, those decisions are reactions more often than not. They're based in fear, they're based in past traumas, past addictions, all kinds of things. And what would appear to our less aware minds as decisions, we see are just reactions. It takes a long time to be able to cultivate enough presence to be able to see the patterns that are, quote, making decisions for me. That is something that takes time, practice, and persistence. But also, I think this is where the Enneagram originally came in. It was to see the sort of automatic patterns in us that are making those decisions for us, so to speak, that will keep making the same decisions. Why I keep dating the same kind of person who gets me into the same kind of pickle every time. Why I keep making the same sort of mistakes in jobs or working with employers or colleagues. Our ego is very repetitive. It's just a set of patterns, conditioned patterns. When we begin to get enough presence to see through it, that begins to open the possibility of something else deeper in me choosing intelligently a wise course of action. But there and then, it also feels like we're being guided to the right decisions. And that we could understand in different ways depending on our background, but it feels like we're being illuminated by a more intelligent path for ourselves. So it sounds to me that you're in a transition. You're seeing that the way you've been before is not bringing you what your heart is longing for. And so it may be right that you're not jumping into some new set of responsibility. It may be right that you're taking time to sort of feel into what you are doing. Now, we still have to pay bills and do stuff like that and take care of ourselves. But within that, there can be periods of time where we're gestating. We're sorting out what's going on inside us because we're ready for a life on a new level than what we were living it before. So as I listened to your words, I kind of felt that that's where you are now. And I also feel from your question that you're seeing things accurately in a way that you probably really are ready for another kind of way of experiencing yourself in life. So thank you for that question, and I really wish you the best with that journey. If you're in the course, maybe we'll talk about it again at some point. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Russ. And I just want to mention, for those of you who may be new to the Enneagram, this course will orient you to a lot of these languages and understandings, and this whole way of grokking the world can become part of how you understand yourself and the world by engaging this course. And if you are familiar with the Enneagram, you will also find yourself right at home through Russ's teachings. If you want to read more about that, you can click over to awakeningyourinstincts.com. We also have the link posted for you in the comments there if that's easier. So you can read through what the opportunity really is on this 10-week course that starts next Tuesday. All right, I have a question here from Audrey. Audrey says, being clearly a type 7, I love learning and applying all my knowledge, but how do I stay focused in recognizing my instinct leading me to the best way of expressing not only my knowledge, but myself as a teacher?
Boy, we're getting good questions. And clearly, as you were just saying, Amy, a lot of these are coming from people with some knowledge of this. So, of course, we'll be holding those questions as we are now, but also explaining things for people who are wading into this material for the first time. I think it's pretty much basic human experience. In that respect, we can always get it. It's just a question of learning some of these terms. So, all right, my 7 friend. What I think the instincts do is as we become aware of them, they tend to fall into a more natural rhythm and into a more natural balance. And as such, they make it easier for me to sit in my skin. They make it easier for me to have a ground in myself. Since so much of sensation and body awareness is found in the instinctual energies, as I begin to actually presence them, it's easier and easier for me to stay here in my body, in the here and now, more directly aware of this experience. From the point of view of teaching, when I'm anchored that way, when I've really landed in myself, I'm in the best position to receive new knowledge, new understanding that's happening in me, and to transmit that while I'm talking with people. then I'm not just repeating something I learned, but actually coming to some truth right there with the people that I'm working with, which is always more exhilarating for me as the teacher, but the students always will feel that and know it too. They know that they're right there with this emergent knowledge, this emergent intelligence, and then they know this is coming from something real. So I think the instincts help us ground in another part of us that is more able to receive through our open and listening mind, through our caring heart, and through our grounded body. We're able to receive the organic nature of the teaching. I'm having a hard time explaining that, but perhaps you can feel what I'm referring to. There's a way the teaching flows forth, which is different from, again, me just repeating something or going through a script or going through bullet points, which are one way of teaching, to be sure, but there's something more powerful in the spontaneous arising of my understanding. And I think sevens of all people would be very excited about this spontaneous element of teaching, which for me, as I said, makes it more fun, makes it more interesting, but also brings forth a more living kind of truth, which is what tends to help people the most. So I hope that addressed the question to some degree.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Russ. I have a question here from Cassie. Cassie says, I'm very intuitive and can even feel people's energy. But why does it seem that my mind and heart aren't in sync? My instincts feel correct, but my mind second guesses.
Mm-hmm. Well, traditionally, in the wisdom teachings behind the Enneagram, we talk about these centers, and we learn that the belly center is actually 3 centers. It's the instincts. And the more we're grounded in the instincts, the more we're able to find a common ground for the heart and mind to come together. And then we have a more adept and capable human being. It's only through presence that the heart and mind can meet. They are very different energies. They run at different paces. They seem not reconcilable. The heart and the mind seem to be in 2 different universes, but it is presence through the body that creates the medium through which they can actually be united. And when they do, the heart and mind coming together is what we call wisdom. There's no way that the mind without the heart can't really be wise. It's when the mind has this element of heart that our more powerful and direct knowing comes into play. But also the heart without openness and understanding tends to go off track as well. We're meant to be 3-centered beings. We all may have a center that works a little more easily for us. That's part of what the Enneagram shows us. But all 3 need to be inhabited to be a whole human being. And if our wisdom, our intelligence, our intuition is going to work, it works through all 3 centers. I used to say that intuition through one center is about 1/3 accurate. I might know something in my gut and it feels very compelling, and I certainly remember the times where I followed my gut and it was right. But a lot of times I follow my gut and I'm certain I'm right and I'm not right. There's other, and again, just following my heart without being grounded or having a clear mind, we may be following old patterns from the past, our inner child's fears and needs without realizing it. And that can lead us into trouble. And the mind has its, but when the heart is connected with the body, we're in a better shape. Same with the mind. The mind brings in another kind of category of knowing, kind of understanding the nature of our experience, of our perceptions. But again, it really needs the body and heart to work well. When any of the centers drops out, our intuition is attenuated. It may be right sometimes, but the more the centers come into alignment, the more our whole organism tends to work better as a vehicle of knowing. One of the things we'll look at a lot in the course actually is about this alignment and harmonization of the centers that in some sense really depends on some degree of balance with the instincts, because it's the imbalances in the instincts that tend to make us go back to the habitual patterns that take us out of our presence. And because they're instinctual, they feel like life and death. So we don't yield those patterns so easily, even when they are distorted and even when they're causing us difficulty. They feel like our fundamental way to survive. So anyway, I hope that's to some degree addresses what you were asking about. So thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Russ. This question comes from George. And George says, it seems pretty clear what I can do if it is the instinctive social subtype or self-preservation subtype that is the least active. What is not very clear is what do I do when it is my sexual subtype that is the most neglected? How do I go about awakening it?
Sure. Well, again, this is one of the things we'll be looking at in the course, but I could just say briefly, sexual energy shows up in all kinds of areas of life. It's not only, of course, about sexual activity, which is part of it, but isn't the whole thing. That being said, your question is valid. Most of the sexual instinct runs under the radar. I live in New York City, and I was just out walking around a little while ago, and I was just noticing myself and everybody, the way everybody just takes a little look at each other. Boom, boom, boom. And some of that is, are you safe? Are you dangerous? That's part of it. But another part of it is like we're checking each other out all the time. Like dogs sniff each other, you know? We're just always like taking a little look, right? Who are you? Oh, interesting, not interesting. We're evaluating and reading that energy all the time. So one area is you could start to be aware of that more. Another way is to just sort of cultivate things that get you out of your habits. They're a little cha-cha-cha. They're a little, feel a little edgy for you, but fun. You don't have to go to a wild sex club or go have an affair or something to develop your sexual instinct. For some people, just listening to different music would do the trick. Watching things that I don't usually watch, going someplace I haven't gone, trying new food, sort of exploring. For most people who are working on their sexual instinct, finding your edge and exploring your edge. People who are low in sexual instinct tend to be very responsible, and they tend to have very patterned lives. So things that take me out of my pattern that I go, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. Oh, well, I like that. I don't know. But you go ahead and do it. And when you do it, you have fun. You feel energized. You feel, giggly. And again, it doesn't have to be anything outrageous. I've had students do all sorts of amazing things over the years. I had one student learn this material, and she took up belly dancing. And she was... let's say in the latter half of her life when she started doing that and just had the time of her life doing that. I've had other students just start listening to other kinds of music, as I said, going places, taking that vacation to an interesting place that I always wanted to go, but I never give myself permission. So things like that, things that activate your life force and your energy. Sexual energy isn't just, it's not passion exactly, because the person who's being very responsible and going about things has passion. Passion is more of a heart thing. But there's this sort of excitation, activation of our energy, things that make us feel more vivid and alive and juicy. And our nervous system turns on. So you have to keep your eyes out for things that do that. And as you do, you will start to find that instinct starting to show you more about it.
Beautiful. Thank you for that great teaching and expanding our understanding of these instincts here. I have a question here from Geraldine, and actually before I take the question from Geraldine, I just want to let you know, Russ, that both Ellen, Birgit, and Audrey both appreciated your responses to their questions. So I'm
Oh,
glad to know
thank you.
that this is being well received. So
Thank
Geraldine, I'm going to summarize your question a little bit. And she says that I've had an accident and now have to undergo 2 major surgeries. And this has created quite a lot of depression for her. She won't be able to walk
you.
without crutches, and it may take a year and a half. And she asks, how can I be helped by learning about my instinct and the Enneagrams? I'm pretty desperate about a plan of battle to get my life back.
Well, wow. Well, first of all, just blessings to you, and uh, may this be the easiest journey that it can be. I'm really feeling empathy with your struggles and your depression. As somebody who's struggled with depression a lot in my life, I sure know what that's like and how overwhelming that can feel. The whole orientation of the Enneagram, I think, is helpful because it's building a platform in us outside of our repetitive thoughts and our repetitive emotional reactions and our repetitive instinctual impulses. All of those are just fine. They just do what they do. They're adequate for basic survival. But as you're discovering, when things go beyond our normal level to cope, suddenly we're feeling the inadequacy of those routines. So there is a way we can use this time as an opportunity to cultivate this other ground, to find the truth and the broader sense of experience that I'm having now. When my writing partner, Don Riso, was in his final days, he had received arsenic poisoning and it paralyzed him. And he also had problems with his spine. So then he got cancer, and he was in tremendous pain and a lot of difficulty. But he would have told you, and maybe I'm just speaking for him, maybe he's telling you this through me. He would have told you that we can't do anything about the particular circumstances in the journey of our life, but we can do a great deal about how we hold the circumstances in our life. And so he went through a great journey of learning to be graciously with what was available to him and to get the best out of the circumstances that he was in. And there's things you can do at those times that you wouldn't have given yourself permission to do at other times. The instincts will become important because they're the body's life energy. And when you're healing, through surgery or an injury or anything of that nature, healing from an infection or an illness, your body needs everything it's got to deal with those needs for cellular regeneration and healing, so that we can do so as quickly and as fully as possible. When our instincts are leaking into other kind of concerns, which they will do if we don't understand this, then that energy that we could use for our healing won't go there. It will go into these habitual patterns, these habitual obsessions. So knowing about our instincts frees up attention so that I can put my attention on things I choose rather than it being sucked into these patterns. And, when we have things go wrong, we're going to have fearful, anxious patterns. We're going to think, difficult thoughts. And believe me, I'm not one of those who says you should think positive thoughts all the time. Great if somebody can do that. But I think more noticing the character of our thought liberates another quality of attention that has an organic wisdom about how to be in the situation I find myself in, and knows how to mobilize those energies, that in life forces that I need in the body to facilitate my healing. So there's a lot more that I could say about that, but I hope that gives you at least a starting point. And my goodness, I sure wish you well on that journey. And if you do decide to take the course, please keep us posted how it's going. Yeah. And just the last thing I'd say when we're going through things like that, what you've just done is so smart. Reach out, communicate, tell people how you're doing. We want to know. Okay? So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Russ. And I appreciate you presencing that importance of reaching out, as the community that builds in these courses is really such an integral part of the experience as we really share this journey together. So if those of you who might have just joined us, you can check out this upcoming course at awakeningyourinstincts.com. It begins in just 7 days. Tuesday, November 27th, awakeningyourinstincts.com will give you all the details about this 10-module course. And we'll talk more about that a little later, but we have so many wonderful questions, and I want to get to as many of them as we can. So I have a question here from Ben.
Okay.
All right, question from Ben. He says, Russ, what do you think of instinctual stacking?
Well, I'm one of the people who developed that idea, so I think it has a certain utility. And as I will talk about in the course, I think it's a more useful way to think of these things than to just decide which subtype am I, which doesn't look at the whole panoply of the relationships with the different instincts. What I am telling my students more and more these days is the question, which one are you, doesn't lead to as much power for transformation development as the question, what is your particular relationship with each of these instincts? How do you live it out? How does that instinct express itself in you? One thing I will also say about stacks is that as I'm looking at them these days, after studying them, gee whiz, for over 20 years, I find that the stack is not as rigid or as inflexible as I originally thought. I think different life circumstances can modify it sometimes. And mostly, I see the first and second instinct sometimes switching place. Like if life demands it of me, sometimes my secondary instinct will move to the front and the dominant will drop back for a while. But I think of the stack more as like a preset. Like when there's nothing else for me to pay attention to, I'm just running on autopilot, the stack will more or less reassert itself. To the degree I'm just unconsciously living out my Enneagram fixation, the stack will reassert itself, with some flexibility for survival needs. What doesn't seem to change as much in my experience, looking at my own journey, but also looking at the journey of many, many students, is that the blind spot, the least developed instinct, tends to be more immovable. Like there's more issues around it. It's harder to budget. And so that becomes a focal point of the way I've learned to work with people on the instincts. Amongst other things, but I think in that regard, the stack teaching becomes very important. Finding the blind spot or the least developed instinct becomes just as important as the one that is the dominant one, the one we identify with.
Brilliant. Thank you, Russ. I have a question here from Nirala. Nirala says, hi, many thanks for this event.
Thank you, Nirala.
In a type 2, why does the individual keep going on a self-blame, feeling guilty, and worrying pattern?
In a type 2. I think whenever we're looking at self-blame and worrying and things as you're describing them, we're always in some sense in the territory of the inner critic. And I would say that type 2 individuals that have 2 as their dominant pattern, they tend to have pretty active inner critics, right up there with the 1s and the 6s. We call those 3 the dutiful types because they have very strong inner critic structures. So the inner critic of the 2 tends to be around selfishness. And so whenever a need is arising for me, something that I might legitimately need as a human being, My inner critic kind of puts me down, makes me feel guilty. Why do you want that? Why are you being such a big shot? Why do you? There's also the inner critic structures around not being there enough for people, letting people down in some sense. I think if we're in the two structure, if that's our dominant, I think if we were to poll our friends and family members, nobody is going to have the view that we're not there for them. No one's going to think we never show up or that we don't care. They all know that. They would probably wish for us to see through some of these self-attacks, because the other downside of those self-blame kind of issues is they make me try harder to do things for people or to connect with people, but often in a way that's off balance. Where if I'm not, how can I put this? If I'm not in my own majesty, if I'm not in my own center of gravity and feeling some kindness and gentleness toward myself, then whatever love I have for others is going to come out in a somewhat off, distorted way. It's being in my own center that gives me the capacity to meet you. It gives me the ability to actually find that heart-to-heart place that I'm looking for as a two. The inner critic, sooner or later we realize it's not really much help at all in this domain. Will it keep coming up? Probably yes. But we learn to be skillful in recognizing it, in taking a breath, in disengaging it. And sometimes that is just allowing myself to feel anger. Not to act it out and have a big old temper tantrum or something, but just to feel the energy of it. That it's sort of taking that energy back from the inner critic so that I feel empowered, and then I can actually blast through it and meet somebody. I think the 9s and 2s especially tend to have trouble with the repression or the denial of anger, and it's really helpful sometimes, especially when we're under inner critic attacks, to reclaim that life force that's being used against me in this internal pattern. So I hope that's helpful and relevant. And I hope any other 2s out there listening that's helpful to you too. So thank you, Norella.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Russ. So we have quite a few more questions, but I would like to take a moment and actually speak about the course. This incredible opportunity coming up. So I just want to mention the course is called Integrating Your Instincts Through the Enneagram. And this really is going to be a life-changing opportunity. It's a 10-week journey under Russ's inspired and inspiring guidance, where you will be able to identify and transform imbalances that are keeping you stuck. You'll be able to do this through understanding your Enneagram subtype and your instincts. You'll be supported to nurture your weakest or least dominant instinct and find the keys to your wholeness and thus your capacity to flourish. You'll be able to experience the energy of your instincts through your body and cultivate a relationship with all 3 instincts. This 10-week course takes place on Tuesdays starting next week, November 27th, Tuesdays at 12 p.m. Pacific. And if for any reason you can't join us live, you won't miss the teachings. You will receive audio and video replays. You also get a transcript of every class, and there are practices provided throughout the week so that you can continue to integrate and contemplate what's being presented in this course. All of those recordings and transcripts are available on the course homepage, which is your private online portal for the class. I also want to remind you that we offer a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses. So that gives you a full 2 weeks until December 11th in this case to make sure that you absolutely love it. And as an added option that I spoke to already, you're all invited, if you join the course, to participate in a private Facebook community group so that you can really stay connected to each other. I want to mention that these courses have been exquisitely produced. You really feel like, Russ is coming into your home each week, and, that he's sitting there in your living room, and that these lessons can be reviewed time and time again as you need them. There are 10 classes total, as I mentioned. We'll start with an introduction, and then you'll have 2 classes on each of the 3 instincts, which Russ will deeply unpack for you throughout the course. And then our final class will be an integration, so that we can bring it all together. And we'll also have some really fabulous guest teachers on this course. Everyone who registers will also receive this incredible bonus collection, which are a collection of audio teachings. The first is the Enneagram, Egypt, and Christianity, Early Roots of the Tradition, which is an audio teaching from Russ. There's also a conversation between Cheryl Richardson and Russ Hudson called The Enneagram and Conscious Self-Care, so important these days. Also, we have the Enneagram in the Light of Christian Contemplative Tradition. That's a conversation between Russ and Christopher Hurwitz. And finally, a conversation between Russ and our beloved Wendy DeRosa called The Instincts and the Chakras, an exploration of life energies. So all of that is to supplement and support you. So thank you so much for allowing me a few moments to share with you the details about this course, which of course you can read all about by going to awakeningyourinstincts.com and click through and see what we've got prepared for you. It's really been an extraordinary experience creating this course. So now I'm going to return to your questions. I have a short but deep question here from Deirdre. Deirdre says, how do the instincts relate to the Tritypes?
Oh my goodness. Well, I tend to think about all of these things as one at a time, in the sense that it's like if you put all the different lenses on at the same time, you can't really see anything, or you end up with everything. It doesn't highlight anything. What I would suggest, and I don't claim to be an expert in the Tritypes, I have friends who are, but I would say that the stack being an independent variable, our instincts being an independent variable, are going to be the same in the other Enneagram categories that we might look at. For example, I am a 5 with a 4 wing, and my stack is the same in my 5-ness as it is in my 4-ness. So if I was a social 5, I'm going to be social 4, and also on the inner lines, that I will go to social 8, social 7, right? If I were self-pres, it would be the same. If I were sexual, it would be the same. And I would imagine that in Tritype, it would also be the same. So if I were, let's say, a 5, 4, 8 Tritype, which I've been told I am, then I would be, if I were self-pres dominant, I would be self-pres 5, self-pres 4, self-pres 8. And in all of it, the blind spot would remain the same. So I think when you try to mix and match, and I'm this and I'm that here and I'm that there, it just becomes so cumbersome that it stops being useful for our inner work. Being able to track my instinctual energies, being able to track my Enneagram patterns, see the inner lines, look at these different elements, you can't really do it all at the same time, just functionally. But I think that kind of knowledge can help us zero in on having our type correctly. If I seem like if I've decided I'm a sexual dominant in my core point, but then I look at my stress point and my integration point, and both of those, the inner line points, seem to be social. Maybe I need to look at the social again from my core point. When it's right, there's a consistency across the board. I can say that. So I would imagine it would function the same way within our perceived Tritype. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you, Russ. A question here from Ivana. Ivana says, what can be done to build a case for the Enneagram being used in psychotherapy? How can we build the evidence to make it mainstream in the field of psychology? I come across psychologists being dismissive, and I would like to use the Enneagram in practice, but I find there's a lot of bias and misinformation about it.
Yes, ain't that the truth? There sure is. It isn't helped by a lot of people in the Enneagram field. There's a lot of hearsay and made up stuff on the internet that has very little relation to the actual history and truth of it. I think there are a couple of angles to this. One is that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. There are a lot of psychotherapists out there already practicing using the Enneagram and getting good results with it. I think the ways that people describe it don't help. I also think that when we don't talk about it with a vertical dimension, we just make this sort of flat Enneagram and these 9 boxes to stick people in. No serious psychologist is going to be terribly interested in that. It doesn't fit any kind of mature sense of psychology. The other thing, though, is that there is research being done. There was a project done back about 12 years ago that Don Riso and I participated in with a company in the UK where a number of top academic psychologists ran the Enneagram through a test using standard measurements that are well established within academic psychology to see if there was any statistical validity to it. Now, they weren't testing an Enneagram test, they were testing the Enneagram. And they were amazed to see that they were getting amazing sigma values. What that means is that the using statistics, everything was working out well past what chance would allow. And so they were intrigued. Unfortunately, we had a big financial meltdown in the world in 2008, and the funding for that project dried up. It would be wonderful if somebody took it up again. That was one thing, and that was looking at it more from the academic psychology, looking at established tests and vectors of temperament and vectors of behavior. The other thing that exists, I know that there are some of my colleagues in the narrative school, my friend David Daniels, who passed away not that long ago, was involved in projects looking at it from a medical point of view. And other people I have worked with, Tina Thomas in Louisiana and others, have been looking at a biological basis for it, how this might actually show up in brain chemistry, in the nervous system, in developmental psychology. So it's going to take time, partially because even within standard psychology, there's not a lot of clear understanding of how these things actually operate on that kind of level. There are the theories that come through the mainstream of psychotherapy, but we have to be realistic that the mainstream psychotherapy, while it's effective in the areas that it is, doesn't have a lot more validation to it than some of the things we're looking at with the Enneagram. In psychology, generally speaking, people on the front lines find things that work. They're trying to heal their patients. They're trying to work with their clients. And when something works, by golly, they're going to use it. And then slowly, as there's a growing consensus that that's a useful tool, academic psychology, or academia more broadly, starts looking at it and trying to understand the basis, the underpinnings of it that can be proven or disproven. But that's a long process. If you look at the history of psychology, if you look at the history of any kind of discovery, it tends to go more slowly than we would like. But I would just tell people it's got significance in the fact a lot of people are using it and finding it very helpful in working with their clients. 2, there are studies that have been done and are being done, and they just aren't widely known yet. And 3, more of those studies will be coming forth. When you have this many people who are, credentialed individuals using this kind of a tool, you have to consider there might be something to it. Right? So I'll just leave it there for now.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Russ. It brings a lot of hope of presencing the transformational capacity that, when we all start to engage these ways of thinking, that it becomes more acceptable and available for healing and evolving. So this has really been quite an incredible hour. I can't believe we're coming to the end of it. And before we close, Russ, I just would love to ask you, what are you most excited about sharing with everyone through this course that starts next week?
Well, a couple of things. I think there's a lot of interest in energy in this topic in the Enneagram field, and people new to the Enneagram field start hearing about these subtypes, these instincts. What the heck is this? It's an opportunity for me to really lay out the best understanding of all this I have from years and years of studying it. And if that's useful to people, fantastic. I really believe it will be. The other part of it, though, is the latter part of the course is going to be more focused on how this plugs in with other ideas, how we work on balancing the instincts. And I think that's going to be a lot of new learning for me and the students, in the sense that we're going to be on a kind of cutting edge of working on this balancing of instincts. Most of my students hitherto that have been in live classes with me about this material have gone on to form groups or to continue practices on their own or with groups long after the workshops are over, because they found it so immediately helpful. So I am also looking forward to having some of my colleagues come in and give me some of their ideas about this. At the root of it, though, I think that when we bring the instinct work into the whole mix, it's a great help against spiritual bypass. We start to see the limitations of our consciousness. It gives us more courage to develop what we can and to actually work on balancing our real life. I also think that it gives us the opportunity to talk about some real nitty-gritty stuff in terms of both opportunities and challenges for our growth as individuals and for the whole of humanity at this point. Heaven knows if we don't figure out a better way to deal with our instincts, if we keep being a species of relentless pac-men chomping on everything on the planet, we're painting a very grim future for our children and grandchildren. So I think working on the instincts is one of the most intelligent and useful ways to start getting at supporting some of the better impulses we have about things we need to do for the future. So I'll leave it there.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for creating this opportunity for all of us humans. It feels like such timely work. And thank you for all the wisdom and teachings that you shared on the call today. I really hope that we will have some of you join us on Integrating Your Instincts Through the Enneagram. It starts next week, Tuesday, November 27th. You can visit awakeningyourinstincts.com to learn more and to register. Russ, any final words to add to that powerful closing for our listeners today?
I don't know. Just if I welcome if you want to come play. I think we're going to have an amazing time. And for everybody who brought in a question today and shared a little bit of your lives with me, thank you. What I didn't say before, a lot of my excitement and joy in doing these courses is the interactions I have with people and the questions that people bring and the dialogues we have. So I'm not joking when I say I really think we're going to learn a lot together. I plan to learn a lot from this course. So also, happy Thanksgiving.
Beautiful. Thank you, Russ. And happy Thanksgiving. May be a day filled with gratitude, peace, and reverence. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. On behalf of all of us here at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or on one in the future. Thank you all.